To go along with the message this morning, the pastor had brought up this song, The Prodigal Son, which is made famous back in the day at the cathedrals. And wonderful song. We put the words up there so you can follow along with us. As Nathan said this morning, if you know it, sing along with us. Special song to me. Special person to me. Called me brokenhearted some time back. And I said, just go get your Bible and let's just go through the prodigal son. And I had them read the story as we went through it together. And it was just a real special moment. So this song means a lot to me, and I pray that it'll be a blessing to you. And as it leads into Nathan's message, the prodigal son. Like a prodigal son, I wandered in darkness and traded my life for worldly good time. No peace in my heart I ever could find. I got so tired eating after the swine. So I believe I'll go home and eat with the Father. The table is spread and they're waiting for me. I can see the Father coming down to greet me. Lord, I'm willing to be just a servant for thee, like a prodigal son. I wandered from Jesus, but the good shepherd saw through the heat and the cold, the naughty and night, he left in the fold just to find this lost sheep that was hungry and cold. I believe I'll go home and eat with the Father. The table is spread and they're waiting for me. I can see the Father coming down to greet me. Lord, I'm willing to be just a servant for thee, just a servant for thee, just a servant for thee, servant for Amen.
Luke chapter 15. I'm going to say this and then go right ahead and get with it. Can't preach after that, you can't preach. Can't preach after what's been going on around here this morning, you can't preach. And I want to say something to everybody in here today. Every one of us in here, in some form, fashion, facility, are going to be able to say, I understand about the prodigal. I left the Father's house and I have squandered and wasted what I have been given on living that could be considered righteous living. And I want to say to you, maybe you're here today and you are a prodigal son, a prodigal daughter, but you are a prodigal child of God, and you have decided, well, I'm just going to see what the world's got to offer. I don't know who you are, don't know where you are, but I do know some things about you. You're miserable. You're tired. You're here this morning because you know down deep in the bottom and the depths of your soul what you need is at the Father's house. You're not here by chance. You're not here by some chance happenstance, just wandered in. You're here by divine appointment. And you're tired of being in the state you're in. Now here's what I'm going to tell you. If you leave here today the same way you walked in, it's your choice. And I'm praying Luke chapter 15, verse number 17 on your life. That you will come to yourself and arise and go to the Father. But I want to speak to somebody else in here this morning before I preach. I believe that we've probably got a room full of prodigal brothers that are mad when the prodigal comes home. That look at the Father and say, you've not been happy for me. Look at where I've been. Shame on us. As I have studied this, the prodigal's brother has bothered me more than anything else, because I know that I've been just like the prodigal's brother. I know that we all have been like the prodigal's brother and have stood outside angry because the Father's excited about one who wasted his life and came home. So here's what I'm praying for you today. That conviction break your heart and you love the prodigal like the Father loves the prodigal. Luke, help us. Listen, Lord, help us. Please help me to be glad when other prodigal sons or daughters like myself return to you. Luke chapter 15, verse 11. I'm going to read all of the verses down through verse 32. I'm going to try myself to contain what I feel so that I can preach and get the message out. But I'm excited for this parable. A earthly story with a heavenly meaning. That's what a parable is. And so, let's begin reading. And he said, Jesus, a certain man had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided, notice this, unto them. He didn't keep the older brother's half, but he divided and gave to both of them. What this father did was pretty much said, I'm dead, and what I have now is divided between my heirs. Divided unto them his living. Not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. When he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, a far country. And he sent him into the fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. When he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. This is some of my favorite portions of the story. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him. He was worthless, wasted, weary, but when he got a glimpse of him afar off, I'm glad the Father can see me afar off. But when, now listen, the father saw him, had compassion, and ran, and fell on his neck and kissed him. The son said unto him, Father, I've sinned against heaven, and in thy sight am no worthy to be called thy son. But the father said, you're here this morning, prodigal, saying, I ain't worth it. I should have stayed home. He don't want me. I'm nasty. I've got all kinds of filth on me. But the father said, he said, Dad, I've sinned. I'm a wretch. I'm unworthy. But the father said to his servants, bring forth the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his hand, shoes on his feet. Bring hither the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. Now his elder son was in the field. Every time God lights a fire, the devil's got somebody with a wet blanket. Amen? The prodigals come home. The father's no longer needing to look down the driveway waiting for the son. He's excited. They're fixing to throw a coming home party. Welcome home, prodigal. Welcome home, Nathan. Welcome home, Luke. Welcome home, whoever you are today. And then all of a sudden, the elder brother comes in, and notice what it says. When his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked of what these things meant. And he said, Thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him safe and sound. Might have been smelly, stinky, and sinful, but he was safe and sound. We may have to put up with a little stench on our prodigals coming home. But let's bring them home safe and sound. Might have to clean some filth off of them. But let's be glad that they come home safe and sound. You still with me this morning? I ain't even started preaching yet. Now notice what about the elder brother. And he was angry and would not go in. And therefore came his father out and entreated him, begged him, pleaded with him. And he answering said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment, yet thou never gavest me a kid. He said, You've killed the fatted calf. You wouldn't even let me have a little goat. Neither gavest me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as thy son, underline that in your Bible, as soon as thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And he said to him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad. For this thy brother was dead, and is alive again, was lost, and is found. The word meet, according to the Strong's, necessary, needful. We had to celebrate. Because he was no longer in a far country. He was no longer in the field. He was no longer adjoined to foreigners, aliens. But he had come home. It was necessary for us to celebrate. Do you know why people don't want to come to church? Because we ill, ornery, hateful, mean. When the prodigal comes home, he walks into a house full of elder brothers. We ain't going to celebrate. We ain't going to get excited. We're not going to be enthusiastic. We're going to say, now, what kind of person is that? God help us. 3 people I want to look at this morning, very to the best of our ability. I started to say hurriedly, but then I'd give you false hope. I want us to see the son, the father, and the brother. Number 1, the son. I can relate to the son. Being a prodigal didn't start in the far country. Being a prodigal started on the front porch. Can I say that again? Because he started already, before his feet took the steps on the journey to the far country, his mind was already wandering down the road. He was already beginning to think, what is outside of my father's house? What is outside the reach of my father's domain? What is outside here? And so he began to wonder. As a matter of fact, the Bible teaches us the younger son, in verse 13, and not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, all that he had been given, and took his journey. The word journey literally means to go into a foreign country, to go abroad. I have been outside the United States. How many of you in here have ever been outside the United States? Things ain't like they are at home, are they? Burger King ain't even the same. On the island of Jamaica, we call them Whoppers. They call them Whoppas. W-H-O-P-P-A. And it's big blue letters on the side. Ain't even the same. They don't call it the same. There's nothing like home, but guess what we often do? It might start about the time we're 12. Why is that preacher preaching against this stuff? Why is my Sunday school teacher telling me I don't need to get involved in this stuff? Why does my mama and daddy want to set rules and regulations on me? What is out there? And before we ever step off the front porch, before we ever pack the first piece of clothing in our bag, our mind starts wondering, our heart starts wondering, and we start wondering before we start wandering. We begin to think and we begin to plan. Listen, this guy knew I don't have it, but if I can get it from Dad, I'm going to leave because I want to know what's out there. Can I say that a lot of times the reason, and I'm probably going to get on some sketchy ground, but I'm going to walk on it anyway. Probably the reason most of us were in church, got saved, and then began to wonder is because we thought the Father will let me come back home. I can't find anywhere where that Father said, okay, when you leave, door's going to be locked behind you, you ain't coming home. There's not a good, loving, caring, compassionate parent that would say, well, if you walk out that door, I ain't going to allow you to come back in. Maybe spiritually speaking, we thought, I'm going to go out there and see what's out there. He began to wonder. Maybe you're out here today and you're wondering. Young people, I want you to listen to me. I know you're tired. Those of you that were at Carowinds yesterday, I know you're probably dragging this morning. I know you're probably thinking, man, I don't even want to be here. I know I don't have strobe lights behind me, and I know I don't have the looks of some of those guys that were up there on stage, but I want you to listen to me right here. There ain't nothing in that far country. There is nothing on that journey to that far country worth leaving the Father for. Let me tell you my testimony, and then I want to go to the next one. I was raised in church. The only drug problem I had was being drugged to church, to every revival meeting, every choir practice, every play practice. I mean, I was drugged to everything. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Bible drill, I was a participant. I went all through children's drill, youth drill, and even came in second in the state of North Carolina in the speakers tournament for Bible drill. I did it. And the first time I drove down out of little old Spruce Pine and walked into a college dormitory, I began to wonder, what is so bad about all this stuff? It didn't start when it came in my room. It started in my mind. When I looked around and I saw everybody else participating in all of this filth, that's what it is. Can we just call it what it is? I mean, listen, I'm just going to be blunt today. I've got enough coffee in me to keep me going, but I don't have enough coffee in me to keep me from being blunt, so I'm going to be blunt today. The problem is we've tiptoed around long enough, and now we got a mess to clean up. Because we have just let it be painted that maybe we ought to let our children sow wild oats. You sow wild oats grow. Maybe they need to experience life. There's some experiences in my 38 years that I wish unto God I could go back and not do. I wish I could change the direction of that steering wheel. I wish I could change the choice that was made in that moment. I wish I would have. And listen, you say, well, maybe if you're surrounded. I had the Holy Spirit in me, but I quenched Him with my own attitude. There's nothing in the far country worth going after. He began to wonder. When he began to wonder, he began to get wasteful. That the idea of being wasteful literally means just to scatter it. Can I say like this? He had a pocket full of money and had an opportunity away from the Father's eyesight, away from the Father's influence, away from, I say influence, he was in a far country, so nobody could go home and tell his daddy what he done. And so as soon as he got out, when something come to him, the Bible said he wasted it on riotous living. The word riotous living, riotous, means lacking morals. Can I just be blunt this morning? I know we got a mixed congregation. I would say there were some sexual experiences that this man had, that he experienced, that were probably leaving the natural affection of a woman. I don't know, but he lacked morals. If there was something that, just like what happened with Solomon, some of y'all can't believe I just said that, but I did. You ought to see the white eyes going around here. Can I say the reason we got the mess we got is because we're afraid that the preacher might say something that pushes the envelope? It's time to push it. And so the problem is this guy, he just started throwing the money at whatever might make him feel good. If it feels good, do it. That's been the mentality a lot of that we are accepting, right? Riotous living, wasteful living, moralless living. The elder brother said he spent a lot of it on harlots. When the partying was over and the money was gone, everybody else was too. Because after he had wasted every single drop of what the Father had given him, after he had wasted everything that was bestowed upon him, every blessing the Father had given, the Bible teaches us that after it was all gone, there arose a great famine. Now, famine particularly means there was no food, nothing to sustain his life. Most of the time, famines go back to there was a lack of rain, so there was a lack of crops, and so no crops, no livestock, things began to die off. Here's what I want to tell you. This was probably a terrible process. Wasn't like he left one day, wasted everything the next day, and then had nothing to turn to and nobody to turn to on day 3. This was a process. This was something that started gradually and continued to go on. And he wasted all that he had. And then there was a famine. As he began to endure the famine, he began to get weary. Notice what he said. When he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in the land, and he began to be in want. Can I say something about being in want? There's no satisfaction. How many of you have ever been dehydrated? Raise your hand. That's probably the worst, in my opinion, in what I've experienced, the worst feeling is being dehydrated. Because it doesn't matter how much you drink, until you get that fluid content, you will drink and drink and drink and drink. And a lot of times in dehydration, you have to go get IV fluids in order to get you enough direct fluid to get you over it. And until you go to have that, you will drink and drink and drink. Listen, there's somebody in here today. You trying money, you trying jobs, you trying relationships, you trying alcohol, you trying drugs, you trying pornography, you trying everything that you can try, and you are in want. There is absolutely no satisfaction, and you won't have that satisfaction till you come back to the Father. He said, not only will I be fed, but they got it to spare. The man that I'm working for feeding his pigs don't even have food for me. I'm having to eat pig food. How many of you ever slopped a hog? I ain't never been that hungry, thank God. Amen? Of course, there's probably a pig look at me eating a cucumber and say, I ain't never been that hungry, thank God, you know. My grandma said even a hog won't eat a cucumber, and I like them. But he was slopping hogs. He began, listen, he was wandering. He began to be wasteful. Then he began to be in want and was weary. Then he felt worthless. What did he say? He said, when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's servants have, hired servants of my father's have bread enough, and I will rise and go to my father. I've sinned and say, I've sinned against thee, and am no worthy to be called thy son. You're probably sitting here today and you say, preacher, you don't know what I've done. You don't know what's hidden away in my heart. You don't know what's hidden in my mind. Listen, here's what I want to tell you. If you can find it between verse 11 and verse 32, where the father said, so son, what have you been up to? Tell me. Because I'm going to tell you, for the last 2 weeks, I've studied it. I've read between the lines. I've read commentaries. I've read in the Strong's Dictionary, and nowhere can I find where the father sit down with him and said, before you come to the house, I got to ask you something. Where you been? Who you been with? What you been doing? Never does he ask that question. And you're sitting here today, and you're thinking, preacher, you don't know what I've done. You don't know what I've said. You don't know where I've been. I'm not even worthy to be in here. I'm not worthy to go. And maybe somebody's listening this morning live through our live stream, and you're saying, I want to be there, but I'm not worthy. Let me tell you something. There's a soul in here worthy to be sitting where we are. But because the Father loved us, cared for us, died for us, had compassion on us, we can sing, I'm a child of the King. We can sing what a day that'll be. And we can sing when we all get to heaven, not because we're worthy, but because He's worthy. He said, I'm not even worthy. You see, when you begin to leave the Father's house, that's the downgrade. You begin to wander in your mind. You begin to be wasteful with your life. You begin to get weary, and you begin to be in want and find no satisfaction. And then the next thing you know, say, I ain't even worthy to go back. But verse 17 is the change. But when he came to himself. Now I want to paint this picture to you the best that I can. And this boy, ragged, smelly, feeding hogs. Hogs stink, period. The only time a hog don't stink is when it's in the frying pan or on the smoker. But I mean, they stink. You feed them nasty leftovers, slop. He had been with them in the field. He had been in the Father's field before, but he didn't stink. He had been in the Father's field before, but he wasn't filthy. He was now in the far country's field, and he smelled like a rotten, stinking hog. Swine. Clothes were all tattered. Clothes were filthy. He was filthy. But he came to, you know what he was doing? He was sitting there, and I don't know. I don't know what was in that bucket. I don't know what was in that hog trough. But the Bible said he would have fain to, he desired to fill himself with what the swine were eating. And as he was looking, fixing to eat and to partake in that, there was an image flashed through his mind. Maybe not the supper table in the big house, but the supper table around the servant's house, and they was still rolls rolling off the table. I said, preacher, where do you get? Because they had bread enough to spare. And he thought, you know what? If he'll just let me be a servant, there'll be a roll off the table into my hand, and I won't be sick. No, I won't be like this no more. So he came to himself. Guess who he saw when he came to himself? The Father. 3 things about the Father. Number 1, he wanted the Son's return. When he meets him at the end of the road, when he meets him a great way off, he didn't badger him with 20 questions. He didn't put him through an interrogation. He was just happy that his boy had come home. I'm gonna say something today, and some of y'all may not like what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it because I believe it with all of my heart. We may say we will do things when our children do certain and live a certain way and make certain choices, but there will come a time when all we know we want is for that kid to come home. It don't matter where they've been. It don't matter what they've done. It don't matter what kind of filth is on their clothes. And it don't matter what they smell like. If I can get them home. If I can get them home. Do you know that there has been times, listen to me. There was about 18 to 24 months of my life where I tried to cover myself with all of the hog slop of this world so that God would not call me to preach. And that God would not use me. And that God would not want me. And you know what? Sitting on a catwalk down there at the lower loading on them railroad tracks at the Courts Corp. Barry Chapel began to ring a church bell in a bell tower that was being dedicated, and the Lord said, "You are not where I called you to be. Come home." You've heard me tell that story. But let me tell you something. As I was going through Fruitland and was reading a book, Ablaze with His Glory by Dale Faisenfeld Jr., and there was a revival took place in a church. It was a good-sized church, and the preacher had some things going on in his life, and he was hiding them, and he come clean. I can take you to Barry Chapel Baptist Church. In the choir loft, it was Youth Sunday. The youth were singing, they were doing skits, they were doing different things. And I looked out over this congregation, and man, I was wanting revival to come to my home church. I was praying that God would send a move of Holy Spirit to my home church. And I was going to school, and I began to look at the faces of people that I know had prayed for me and lifted me up to God when I was out running wild and doing what I needed to do and sowing my wild oats and experiencing my life. And let me tell you something, there never was a wild oat I sowed that sprouted up in anything worth sprouting up. The only experiences that I can tell you is now I've got a life full of regrets. About 2 years, wishing I'd have never done some things that I did. And the truth of it is, if we all wasn't so super spiritual in here and so holier than now, we'd say, I've done exactly the same thing. But I never will forget looking out over that congregation that night, and my buddy Justin Hollifield was sitting beside me, and we grew up together in church. He said, man, what's the matter with you? And I was squirming. I couldn't sit still. Some of y'all know Justin. I told him, I said, man, God's convicting me, and He's leading me to do something I'm absolutely scared to death. And this is what my friend told me. He said, I will stand beside you. Mind the Lord. And so with my friend, my childhood friend, standing beside me, I began to confess that I had been to places and done things that was not the Nathan that they saw grow up, and I needed their forgiveness. And I never will forget the man who was a chairman of deacons when that service was over with. He walked up to me, and this is what he said. Son, I've prayed for you. I don't care where you've been. I'm praying for where you're going. The Father wanted the Son to come home. How many times as prodigals have we felt in our worthlessness, they don't want me back because of what I've done, because of where I've been? The prodigal's father wanted the son to return. Number two, he was watching for the son's return. I don't even know. I've never been there. I don't even know if in, let's just say Israel, because let's just say in Israel, I don't even know if they got rocking chairs. I don't even know if they got a front porch like what they do in Spruce Pine. But let's put it in our context. Our driveway is probably about, well, actually it's 200 and something yards because I've hit it with my rangefinder from my front porch to the bottom. Rednecks get bored and we have to fill our time sometimes. But you can sit on one of those rocking chairs on my front porch and you can see when somebody turns in this end on Barney McKinney, and you can see when they turn on this end on Barney McKinney, you can see when they come up the driveway. And I can't tell you this is the way it looked, but probably it was not yet supper time. I don't think it mattered what time it was. But for some reason, that prodigal's father was doing something he had been doing for a few years at least, I believe, and that is sitting on the front porch, staring down the driveway, waiting for that son to come home because he knew what I've given him's going to run out, what I've left him's going to run out, and hopefully, I pray, I want that when it runs out, he'll run back to me. So he's watching. Can I tell you something this morning? He's watching you. He watched you through the night to keep you safe to get you here today. He watched you as you started getting ready, and the devil said, don't even go. Don't even go. Ain't worth it. Singing ain't no good, and the preaching's even worse. Don't even go. You'll feel like an outcast. Don't go. But there was images popping through your head of a Savior with a nail-printed hand reaching out to you. There was images of Calvary, bloody, rugged, and a voice crying out, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. There was an image of an empty tomb and the stone rolled away and light protruding out of it to let you know He is not here, but He is alive, like He said, and He's coming back for you. And He's been watching as you got yourself ready and started easing into the Father's house. He knows where you're sitting today. He knows what you're struggling with, and He wanted you here, and He's watching you here. And here's the last part of it. He welcomed him when he returned. When he was a great far off, I don't know, probably he was shoeless, didn't have an outer cloak on. Go sit up yonder. filthy, nasty, stinking. More than likely shuffling his feet. I doubt in what he had pockets, but I've been kind of beat down before, and what do you do and I do? We put our hands in our pockets, hang our heads, and unbeknownst, sitting on the front porch. And what does the Bible say? He saw him when he was a great way off and ran to him. Fell on him. Kissed him. Don't you kiss me. Well, man, I was praying that somebody would fall right in line with me and we'd work this out. But now, listen, we ain't Hollywood. Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I'm no more worthy to be called thy son. But the Father said, don't you know them servants wondered, what's that old man doing running down the road? Where's he going? So when the Father started running, they was more started coming. They saw an old weary, beat down, wasted figure of a man coming down the dirt road. And he fell at his feet. And the Father fell right on top of him. Let me tell you something today. You need to come home. And when you start getting down that road, he's going to be waiting. I can't explain it. I'm not trying to be supernatural or whatever you want to call it. I'm not trying to be. You may not see them, but you'll feel him. You know why he welcomed his boy home? I've got some other points, but I want to deal with the brother here in just a minute. Because he was repentant. When he fell at the Father's feet, he said, I'm sorry. I've sinned. I've wronged heaven and you. The Father said, somebody go get him some shoes. Go get the best robe we got in the closet. That ring that says he's mine, put that on his finger. Go get that beef cow we've been fattening up. It's time to eat. You go back to your place and you get your banjo, your guitars. Get your mandolins. We're gonna celebrate tonight because my son that was gone, dead, and lost is alive and found. He wants to welcome you home. Don't stay in the far country. Don't stay away, alienated. Come home. The brother. The music and the party began to get to the field. And the brother comes home. And he says, ask one of the servants, what's going on? What's happening? That servant, in his excitement, the brother that was gone, dead, lost, is alive, found, and at home. And he was angry. Some things that have stuck out to me about this. I hope this works. He wouldn't even come in the house. He stayed outside. Because of his jealousy, because of the fact that the father was excited, he wouldn't even come in the house. The Bible says he wouldn't even go in. Could y'all hear any of that? Amen. Good. How many times do we say, I ain't going to that church because of this person? Uh-oh. I ain't going to that church because of this, and this is what they did. You're the brother. If that person that you're pooch-lipped about, saved and washed in the blood, but they ain't perfect because you ain't neither, if they end up in heaven, what are you going to do? Walk up to King Jesus, say, do you care to scoot my mansion down the road just a little bit because I don't want to live next to them? Ain't right. He was angry. He was filled with wrath. He was wrathful at the fact that the Father, as I have studied this, and you can say whatever you want, and I'm going to throw this out here, he was just as mad at the Father as he was the brother. He was just as mad about the brother coming home as he was about the Father throwing him a party for being there. The base of his anger was jealousy. What did he tell him? When the father come out, he said he went out to entreat him. The word entreat means he come to beseech him, to beg him, to plead with him, to come in the house. Listen, your brother's home, your brother's home. And here's what he said. He said, I have been here and served you faithfully. Read it. I have been here and I've served you faithfully. All these years, I've not transgressed one of your commandments. I have lived a religious life. And you've given me nothing. Can I kind of sum up what he said? Dad, I've been serving you for the reward, not because it's you. The prodigal come home because the father was home. The elder stayed home because he wanted it. How many of us are like the prodigal's brother and we are jealous because they're excited because somebody lost gets saved? And we get upset and jealous because maybe that lost person's got something and we say, well, I've been in church my whole life. And all I've had is trouble and trials and tribulations. Isn't that the way we look at things? I've done all I know to do just to serve the Lord and be faithful, and I ain't got nothing. That's exactly how we treat the Father. Lord, if I come Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, if I'm faithful to Sunday school, if I teach kids church, if I do this, if I do that, and if I do this, if I serve on every committee, and if I make sure I put an extra $2 in the offering plate, what am I going to get from you? And that's what the brother did. And the jealousy over the celebration, he said, you wouldn't even give me a kid, and you've killed the fatted calf for him. And the father said, son, it was necessary. Now I want you to notice a play in words. The servant said, he said, what's the party about? The servant said, your brother's home. The father says, it was meet because your brother had returned. But what did that hateful, arrogant, spiteful brother say? Your son's come home. Was denying and breaking the fact they were already in the same family. But he was mad and wouldn't even claim him as his brother because the father loved him. How many times do you and I say, well, I'm glad I'm not God. I sure wouldn't have been gracious right there. I'm glad I ain't God either. Because if anybody needed to be a burnt place left on the planet, it's me. If there's anybody around that he deserved to zap out of this world, do like he done the sons of Korah, open up the earth and let it be swallowed up, rain fire and brimstone down on my head, it's this boy right here. But he is compassionate and runs to us and loves us and cares for us, and thank God for that. And it is wrong for me to look at somebody and say, well, that's your kid. but he ain't my brother. There's a song I want to play as a hymn of invitation. And I want you to stand to your feet today. And I want you to listen to what I'm about to say. If you're here today and you have been wasting your life, it's time to come home. If you have been a pilgrim journeying in a far country, it's time to come home.